let's talk parking lots. So this is a new site that was developed probably about 6, 7 years ago. This is Branch Funeral Home up in Miller Place. And the reason I chose this one to take a look at is it's got a really nice view of the parking lot. And it is in the town of Brookhaven, so you can kind of see how some of these standards come into play. I want to just show you what we're dealing with. So this is a standard lot. So each of these parking spaces will be 19 feet deep and 9 feet wide. That's the standard that we work for. And if we look at this, we have what's called bidirectional flow. We get traffic moving in both directions, which is something we want in a parking lot. And two things. One, it is a town requirement. But second, how many times have you gone into a parking lot and driven down the wrong way of a one-way aisle? You don't have to admit it. We've all done it. It's annoying. Or someone comes at you when they're supposed to be driving the opposite way. Well, to prevent that, we keep these aisles to be 24 feet wide. That's your standard. And that allows for easy passage of all the cars moving from each other. But when you're designing out these lots, there's two things you have to take into account. This piece of property is kind of about that size. So remember, we have that 35% area that must remain natural and undisturbed. That's kind of in here. Okay, we get about 35% landscaping throughout this with this large chunk on the side. You'll notice here, actually, it's a little bit skewed. Let me kind of fix that. A little bit better, not much, but there we go. But you'll notice here we have that nice row of greenery. Okay, that's the parking lot screening that we're talking about. In this case, it's screening the back of this building from light shining into it from all those headlights. But like I was saying before, when you're designing a parking lot, you want to make it easy to flow, but you want to get the maximum number of spots in there because that's going to really affect the usage of the building. If you don't have enough parking for the people inside the building, even though it may meet the requirements of what the town is asking for, it's not a useful system. You'll also notice over here we have these blue striped. That is our ADA required handicap accessible parking. Those spots, if we were to actually measure them out, these do not have to be the same as a town size of 9 by 19. These only have to be a minimum of 8 feet wide. And the reason why is you have this gore, it just means a painted area like that allows for opening and closing of doors. Where a 9-foot section, you need that 9 feet wide to get your doors open and closed. So that's what we're looking at for that parking lot. As far as landscaping, we have these landscaped islands through here. Minimum width on these landscape islands, 3 feet. And that's really a practical standard. Anything less than 3 feet, your plants aren't going to grow. Okay, they're going to die off. So we want to make sure you have some landscaping in there. And then we do have this big chunk of landscaping over here. That's actually considered to be technically inside the parking lot. So if you remember back into the landscaping code, it said under parking lots, you want to break them up into groups of 50 spots. And within each of those 50 spots, you need to have 400 square feet of landscaping. You don't have to make it look pretty, as long as it's green, that's landscaping. Okay, so that's an example of a typical parking lot. Let's look at another one. So this is Chick-fil-A, okay, up on Nesconset Highway in Port Jeff Station. Relatively new structure, and this is a great parking lot. And their chicken's not too bad either. But in terms of the parking lot, what I really want to draw your attention to is look at how they used the site to maximize the amount of parking possible. A couple of things. We have dumpsters back here. Okay, so our dumpster enclosures on a concrete pad. Why would you put it on a concrete pad? Well, think about how these dumpsters get emptied. You have a large truck come in with forks, lifts up the dumpster, picks it up, and then drops it back down onto the ground and pushes it back into place. If that was asphalt, that asphalt would get torn to pieces by that constant dropping of that dumpster. So a very smart move. They put a large concrete pad on there to make sure that it's more durable. But back to the landscaping. So look at the islands. These islands that we see through here, these kind of give some outline to the parking lot, and it gives you that 400 square feet areas that we want to see wherever possible. In an area like this, where we broke down this landscaped island and we kind of snuck 2 extra spots in through there, that's great. But let's see if we can blow this up a little bit more. If I were to draw a line connecting the backs of these all the way across, all right, you'll notice that the distance from here to here, okay, it's not even. So why don't we have the back of those spots lined up with the curb line? Why do we keep it 3 feet shorter? Why do we keep the landscaping line 3 feet shorter? So think about that, and we'll come back to that in a second. This actually was designed as a dual site. This store here is a Verizon store, and then here's the restaurant. So they developed this site as one common site with 2 different buildings on there. But actually, you know what, let's take a look at how this was actually developed, and then we'll come back and answer that question about the 3 feet. So too many tabs open. Okay, so let's go back in time, jump in the time machine to 2008. And that's what this place looks like. It's basically, I think it was a car dealership, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that was a car dealership back then, or a service store, something like that. And over time, business went out of business, and they developed the site. We're getting there. Okay, so the buildings are taken down. They raise the site. They remove all the material, all the foundations, all the asphalt. And the first thing to go in is, look at that, beautiful. I love seeing those rings. What are they? That's your drainage structures. I guess your drainage and also your sanitary rings. Those things are put in place right away. That's going to be part of your stormwater management plan, your SWIP, which you'll learn about in green building. We were supposed to do a little bit more of that in site plan. We just kind of ran out of time. But you can also see the installation of the foundations as well. So we have our stabilized construction entrance, all the drainage required for a site like this, all the sanitary, I believe this is sanitary here, if I'm not mistaken. So all that's put in place. And then as we go forward in time, that was quick, what was that? That was a year. All right, not so quick. Beautiful site. And you really can see how these areas, we have the buffer screening in the back. I can't draw on this one. We have the buffers in the back with all the trees back here along the screening. You have your drive-through with a queue. Okay, remember the queue is where we line up cars so they can come through and drive through and pick up whatever they need to pick up. And then we have the entrance and exit through there. So this is really a classic example of a well-designed parking lot. It functions well, you can drive through it. And that's something I want you to learn from. In your careers, I mean, when you're designing a parking lot, there's not a whole lot you can do with it. You have a bunch of spaces, 9 by 19, that you have to fit into the site. But you also have to kind of, in your mind, drive through this and see if it works. When I was first starting out, we would actually print out the plans to scale and take a matchbox car and drive it through the parking lot. And this way you could see, how did it work? How did it feel trying to make these turns and maneuver your way through this? But let's go back now to that question I asked you. Why do we keep these islands 3 feet shorter? Well, it turns out that I gotta do a little bit of erasing here. Let's see, I'll make it yellow. Oh, that's way too big. So if I have my car, all right, I want to back out like that. If my island comes all the way out here in line with that red line and I have to back out, I have to go even further out before I can start making my turn. If I don't, my wheels are just going to cut over the top of that curb. So knowing that that's a problem, we always take the islands and we make them, oh, not that. What did I just do? We always want to make them 3 feet shorter than the ends of your parking spaces. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Always going to be the case. You also want to keep areas set up where people don't park. Okay, this little triangular area here. What's great about that is that counts towards the landscaping requirements in the parking lot. It also prevents people from parking in those areas. If I have a parking space here, there's a 9 by 19. Here's a 9 by 19. I'm really just jamming in spots wherever I can. Well, why didn't I put the spot like this? Why not make a 9 by 19 here and then make this all landscaping? I could add some more landscaping there. Could have been done, but I was able to sneak one extra spot in by doing it a little bit differently. So just think a little bit outside the box sometimes. Think of different ways of setting it up and use things like Google Earth as an example to see what's a good way of designing things and what's a not so good way of designing things. Let's take a look at some poorly designed parking lots. So if I had to pick one place in Suffolk County where things are poorly designed, let's see. Get my north arrow back up north a little bit. Good old Suffolk Community College. Okay, their parking lots are atrocious, which is good for us. Okay, these are old systems. This is an old design. Well, first of all, the college is its own entity. We don't have to follow anybody's requirements as far as site plans go. We do have to follow Department of Health, but we don't have to follow Town of Brookhaven, and we don't. But in doing so, it makes it, a bit of a problem. So let's look at the parking lots. Just as a refresher, I know you haven't been there in a while. Remember, this is off limits to you. That's my parking spaces. Please don't park there. You can do whatever you want back here, but don't take my parking spots. But let's take a look at this. This is the first poorly designed parking lot to talk about. So when you're designing a parking lot, what you want to do is you want to make sure that when you're, let me just quickly screenshot this, and this way we can draw on it while we go. Okay, so let's say that I park back here. You got there late. It's the only spot that's left. So now you have to walk all the way across to the gym. To do that, you're going to have to go through the cars, up and over the grass, through the cars, then jump out into traffic. Then through the cars, up over the grass, through the cars, right out into traffic. Don't do that. Okay, this is a bad way to design. I know they did it because you fit more cars in here, but it's much safer if we aligned everything where, and we're just kind of do this on the fly, if we put the islands this way and you had parking spaces on either side, you will not fit as many cars in here, but it's safer for the occupants. And isn't that what we're all trying to make sure we do? Keep this safe for people walking out. So now, if you're parked over here and you walk out, there we go, you can safely walk down the traffic aisle without any worries of cars jumping out and surprising you. And if you think about this, if there's like a van parked there and you're walking out and there's a van blocking everyone's view and someone's speeding through the parking lot, even though there is a speed limit of I think 10 miles an hour, people do 30 in the parking lot because they want to get home, they want to get out of there. So try and design things where if your building is here, you always want your parking spaces to have a perpendicular drive aisle to the face of the building. Just good practice to have. So let's see if the college does that anyplace else. So we're going to go back into these parking areas. Well, these parking areas are so far away from the buildings that it's really not too much of an issue. But let's go into these anyway. Let's start in the very, very back at this parking lot. So first of all, line striping. A little bit squiggly. That should be a little bit straighter. But did they change this? Yeah, they've just kind of touched up a little bit. Let's just take a look at some of the things that they've done wrong on here. So these areas here, these are called the gores. Okay, it's just a painted area to prevent people from parking there. That doesn't stop people from parking there. Okay, all that does is it creates a line that says you shouldn't park here. But if you want a physical barrier to stop people from parking, build a concrete island and landscape it. Here they switched ideas. Well, maybe we'll make it triangular instead of having a radius to it. You got to have some consistency. They redid this parking lot, okay? And this one came out much, much nicer. I'll show you what it looked like before. It was just kind of rows of parking. Actually, from a safety standpoint, it was not bad because as you exited your vehicle, you could walk down the traffic lane to the path. But now they've made it a little bit nicer. They put more parking on the sides. We have the islands. And what's nice about those islands is it stops people from driving down and directly into the cars. We see people still do a great job of parking in between the lines, maybe not. The islands also give you a nice, if we measure this, we should have at least 24 feet of a continuous traffic aisle through there. It's just like we'd have over here. So much better job with that parking lot. Even here, these were redone. Look at all the ADA accessible, handicap accessible parking spaces that are in here. So it's nice to see that they finally put that stuff where it belongs. That wasn't there for the longest time. If we go back in time, we had some. That's a little blue over here. The rest of it's red. And remember, red means don't park there. That's my parking spaces. But when they were done, actually, I'll show you the difference between those two. I don't park there, so I haven't seen what it looks like in a while. It used to be 3 parking lots, and they wound up reconfiguring it to 2 parking lots. And I think they actually got more cars in there when they were all done, but it just looks nicer. I mean, yes, the asphalt looks nicer, but if you look at it from a standpoint of, I love the way the islands cut in there. I think that's a really nice look inside of all the parking lots, and it's functional as well. The idea behind this is when you exit your car, you get yourself onto that sidewalk as quickly as safely as possible, and then you can carefully walk down the sidewalk and go to the rest of the campus as needed. Crosswalks are very well delineated, so people know that this is a walking path where you need to be driving more carefully. Okay, so then we have this parking lot. And with this parking lot, they kind of got lost in the process of doing it. They wanted to put some landscaping in place. And they have another large section of landscaping here. But what this should have been is they should have taken this and distributed it a little bit more between the parking lot, the parking rows of parking. By putting these large sections in here, yes, it does give the benefit of having a cooling factor where it's not as large of an amount of asphalt, but we'd like to see more landscaping in between the individual parking spots, because as you start parking next to each other, some people bump into the back bumpers, and that landscaping acts as a nice preventative of that. Here's an example. There's really no landscaping back here. Okay, in an area like this, if you're parked back here, you're just going to drive straight across to get to the exit. There's no incentive to follow your way down the rows. Where if you have landscaping and you want to get out, you can't cut across. You have to, follow the curb line to get yourself out of there. So what I'm saying with this is use examples of good parking areas and bad parking areas to set yourself up for the future. Okay, take a look at lots of examples. There's tons of stuff available through aerials like this. Let's take a look at one more. I just lost track of where I am. Smith Haven Mall. Plenty of parking there. Boy, it's a lot of asphalt. Okay. This is a structure that's been around for a long time. And if we take a look at the old areas of parking lots, okay, this is an older section of parking lot. You'll notice that it just has rows of cars and that's it. If we take a look at the newer sections of the parking area that they've been put in place, you'll notice that when they redo parking areas for new site plan applications, which means it had to go into the town and get approval, you start seeing the landscaping come in. Okay, and landscaping serves two purposes, or actually more than two purposes. It gives you a nice cooling effect because those trees do break up the expanse of asphalt. That's one thing. It stops people from driving 90 miles an hour across the parking lot, so it becomes a safety break as well. And the third thing is when we get snow, I know we didn't get any snow this year, it gives you a place you can store snow, okay, right on that center island and even on the outside. So landscaping of parking lots, okay, when they expanded the mall, this was also a newer section that was added in there. More landscaping. Every other row, they kind of landscape through here. Okay, islands help delineate where the traffic goes, acts as a bit of a buffer. So if you want to have parking, put it up against the landscaping block so people don't stick out into the traffic area. So like I said, look around. There's plenty of examples out there of good and bad parking designs. Okay, here's another area that's been redone. This used to be all just open, and when they changed over, they wound up putting all these islands as well. And you'll notice that they're not going to be more than 3 feet, less than 3 feet, because the landscaping is just going to die off. And even on this, the radius, this little teardrop here, where it gets very, very small, areas like that tend to not do so well. So try and keep your landscaping blocks nice and chunky. They'll do a lot better that way. It also gives you a great place to stick your light poles. This way, when you have to have lighting, it's not sticking out in the middle of a parking lot where people can accidentally run into it or a plow runs into it, anything like that. All right, so that kind of does it for the ideas behind parking lots. We're going to talk about the ADA requirements next. So when you're designing a parking lot, you have to also comply with federal law. And the federal law that you're concerned about with parking lots has to do with ADA compliance. That's the American Disabilities Act. This is administered through the U.S. Department of Justice. And they do provide guidance on what size these spots have to be and what they need to be. And this handout is also in your folder. And it tells you the minimum number of accessible parking spaces that has to be provided under federal law. And it is minimum. That's important to note because you can always provide more than that, and I think that's a good idea. For instance, if you're building a medical office where you expect to have a lot of patients that are going to be coming in maybe for, it might be like an orthopedic center where people might be on crutches or wheelchairs, then it might make sense to design your parking lot with more than the minimum required number of handicap accessible spots. The catch with that is you can always park a handicap vehicle in a regular spot, but you cannot park a regular vehicle in a handicap accessible spot. So you have to make sure you do provide enough regular parking as well. As far as the calculations go, these are the numbers we're working with. So what we're looking at is that when you have a certain number of parking spaces, either 1 to 25, 26 to 50, whatever that number is, you have to have a total number of parking spaces as per column A. So 1 to 25 requires 1 handicap space, 26 to 50 requires 2 spaces, 51 to 75, 3 spaces, and so on. Of those total number of spaces, 1 of them needs to be van accessible, and when you get to the higher numbers, 2 of them need to be van accessible. There's a difference in the size between a handicap accessible space for a car and a handicap accessible space for a van. Vans require more space than cars do. So a car can always park in a van spot, but a van cannot always park in a car spot. I would strongly recommend you design all your spaces to be van accessible. This way, cars and vans can use them both. Now let's take a look at exactly what the difference in size is. Just erase that real quick. Size-wise, we're looking at your van space being 96 inches for the van space itself. That's going to be 8 feet from there to there. Then we have another 8 feet for that van space. That's the width of the parking spot. And then the striped area in between the spaces, that's also 8 feet as well. So 8, 8, and 8, 2 parking spaces share one striped section. If you only have a single parking space, you need to provide a full 8 feet of striping as well. So we see in this diagram here, from here to here, that's 8 feet. There to there, that's also 8 feet as well. You have to provide all that space. But 2 cars can share the same 8-foot section at the same time. Now that differs from a car accessible spot. Car accessible spots are also 8 feet wide, but the difference is the width of the striped area. The striped area is only going to be 5 feet wide. And the reason why is you don't have these large ramps coming out of cars as you would a van. But my suggestion, keep everything as a 8-foot wide space all the way across. It just makes your life much simpler. Now in terms of the calculations for the number of spaces, very simple. If you're between 1 and 500 spaces, you just pull the number off the table. But if you're over that, then it gets a little bit more difficult. So let's say we have an example of 1,500 spaces. If that's the case, you need to have 20 for the first 1,000 spaces, and then 1 additional for each 100 over the 1,000. So that would be 500 extra spaces. That would require a total of 5. So 25 ADA spaces. I would personally round it up to 26 so it's an even number, and the reason why is 2 spaces can share a single striped area. So if you have to put an 8-foot wide space and an 8-foot striping, you might as well put 1 extra handicap accessible spot on there. It's not going to hurt the parking lot, it's only going to enhance the parking lot. Now these standards are included in the total number of spots. So if the town of Brookhaven requirements say you need 88 spots, then that would fall here between 76 and 100. 88 spots would require 4 ADA handicap accessible spaces. So that means 84 regular spaces and 4 ADA spaces. It's not in addition to, it's inclusive of.